Hello and welcome back to Beastcoast Pokemon. Today we're going to be talking about kind of the elephant in the room, which is the fact that Regulation D was recently announced. Now, I don't know if this has been officially confirmed to be the Worlds format, but it's very, very likely. This basically is a format where everything that we know, everything that we've learned so far about Scarlet and Violet kind of goes out the window. First impression, Aaron, what are your first impressions on Regulation D?
Wolf, it's great to have you here. I feel like, we've done content. James and I have done obviously a bunch, and Rose just joined us, so it's really nice to have you on for this as well. First impression, I definitely was surprised. I was caught off guard. This is really chaotic. I would not have predicted this to be the format. I thought it would have been post-Worlds. From like a content perspective, I think I'm excited just because I'm getting a little bit bored of Regulation C. Competing perspective, I'm curious to see how Worlds will go in particular this summer for all the competitors.
For those of you at home who don't know what Regulation D is, it is basically the current format what we currently have of Regulation C with the Paldea Pokedex, but now we have all the Pokemon that are coming back from Pokemon Home introduced, and that includes the new Hisuian forms from the Legends of Arceus games, and seems to be trending, I think, in a lot of a very offensive direction with a lot of heavy hitters and new strong moves that we've gotten introduced. So it'll definitely be hectic for players, but probably very exciting for viewers.
I'm in the same boat where I thought it would have been the Paldea Prologue, the online tournament that happened on the Switch just a couple of months ago. I kind of figured that might have been how we would have end capped the entire season. While this hasn't been confirmed as the Worlds format, it's really hard to think about anything else that it could be unless they decide to just throw in Koraidon and Miraidon on top of the mix and finish off the season with the regional decks.
Yeah, I think that like one of the things that makes this format so interesting is that it breaks tradition in VGC. So the way that it's always kind of worked in the past is for the first year of a new generation, we have, 3 years per generation. So the first year is kind of this thing that we call regional decks, which is basically only Pokemon that you can catch in the base regional decks of the game. Then it's national decks, which opens it up to transfer Pokemon, DLC Pokemon, pretty much a much wider Pokedex, not including some of the super powerful legendary Pokemon like Xerneas, Kyogre, Groudon, Zacian. And then the final year, we play something called restricted format, which is 2 of these super powerful legendary Pokemon that previously were banned. So this breaks tradition for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're using these national dex Pokemon, and James mentioned there's the Hisuian forms. The other Pokemon that are very relevant are a lot of powerful legendary Pokemon. Landorus, Therian, Thundurus, Tornadus all come back. Heatran, Cresselia, Urshifu, Regieleki is a big one. So there's a lot of the kind of really heavy hitters from Sword and Shield and before coming back. It's not only the fact that we're kind of doing this national dex early, it's also this is the first Worlds ever where there is no major tournaments prior to like Worlds itself. It'll be the first time where Worlds is the first and only tournament of a format, which I think is going to affect things in a big way, but I'm curious what you all think.
Normally, Worlds is a tournament where people go out of their way to counter the metagame. We spend so much time, so many events before Worlds establishing this metagame, and especially in the regional dex formats, a lot of the winning teams in the World Championships have been like very anti-meta. When Ray won Worlds in 2011, for example, in that gen, he used a lot of unorthodox sets like Gothito as well as really bulky Thundurus, which he innovated. When Sejong won Worlds in 2014, it was Pachirisu, and I'd say Ryota's team in 2017 was also pretty out of the ordinary. So what's interesting is so much of the regional dex formats usually focus around countering the meta. There's not really going to be a meta going into Worlds, right? Like we'll see people who have played online, obviously, and maybe on the ladder, but the best players who are competing at Worlds very likely won't really be playing that much publicly online because they're, of course, going to be trying to conserve their strategies. I think that's what makes this Worlds in particular really interesting. It's like, do you try to actually counter the things that you expect to be popular, or are you just going to be like, let me just find what I think is the best overall strategy, just try to go from there, because there isn't really this context to the World Championships. I think one of my other questions is just how much do these new additions actually change the format? My impression is honestly a ton. If that ends up not being the case, then there is a lot of inspiration from, the last few months of VGC that we've been playing, then maybe there will be somewhat of an established meta to counter. That to me, I think is what makes it super interesting.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really weird World Championship. As we said before, like this is kind of the first time we're having a brand new format for the World Championship, basically. It's kind of strange because I feel a lot of the metagame development that just happened throughout the Scarlet and Violet kind of disappears because there's so many specific Pokemon that just like end up changing the entire game, and a lot of different cores. I don't think it's really based off anything we've seen in previous regulations. I think a lot of them are going to be completely different. So the best call, the best team, it's going to be more of like prediction based on like what you actually think is going to be the strongest factor, because we don't have really anything to build up. No previous tournament knowledge unless people play again online, like Aaron said, but one hectic format for sure, where everyone's on a brand new playing field. Everyone's racing towards like an end goal of what can they actually build that actually feels good to them in about a month and a half.
Just looking at the list of Pokemon that are going to be included for this particular format, there are definitely a couple of Pokemon that stick out to me as ones that could be really meta-defining. I mean, right off the bat, I'm looking at like Ursaluna. That's one of the new Hisuian Pokemon that I think has gotten a lot of attention over the past few days since the announcement. Just knowing that there are so many powerful options for this Pokemon with its Guts ability, but even just looking at some of the more familiar faces, I guess, I'm looking at Regieleki, maybe even Galarian Moltres. Curious to know what you are thinking as well about the powerful meta Pokemon.
Yeah, I think that kind of is a nice tie-in between what Aaron was saying too, which is like, how much do these Pokemon change things? I agree. I think that it's a ton. We saw even how much the addition of a small set of Pokemon changed the format, right? Like adding Ting-Lu and the other Ruin Pokemon in, Gyarados all of a sudden spiked in usage in a way that it hadn't, really even been on anyone's radar before. And all of a sudden it's, outperforming Arcanine, or at least matched with it as the Intimidator. So even adding a small number of Pokemon, realistically adding in the Ruin Pokemon was adding 3 Pokemon, because even adding Ursaluna alone into a format, like into our current format, would have changed things drastically, because we would have gotten such a strong Trick Room sweeper. So I'm excited for this Worlds because it presents a novel challenge, but it does feel like sad in a sense. Like for me, Worlds is the culmination of a format, even when the formats are different, right? Like we had in 2019 with like Sun, Moon, and Ultra, or if you're James Beck, just Sun. But it always felt like it was like, okay, like we've mastered this format. Who is the best player of this specific rule set? And this Worlds isn't going to test that. I don't think it will test the best player of the rule set, because we won't have had time to like figure everything out. So I heard that Cresselia gets a move that is like Life Dew and Heal Bell, or like
Lunar Blessing. Yep.
So that's interesting.
To give context to Lunar Blessing, it's a healing move that Cresselia gets from the Hisuian region. So coming in from Pokemon Legends Arceus, is able to heal up its partner by 25% and also remove status conditions. So that's why people were talking about it with alongside like Ursaluna, for example. You can get rid of the Guts burn from like a Flame Orb, and then I guess the burn damage is supposed to go before that, but you don't get any burn damage then, since Flame Orb will activate after, so you still get the Guts boost for the next turn.
I was gonna say, I like couldn't believe it when I was doing research on like the old Pokemon returning, and I was like, they gave Cresselia a new move and they gave the Genies a new move as well.
I can't believe that.
I was like, look, they'd be fine without it. Like, how relevant do they want these Pokemon to be? I do think it's interesting because we've been conditioned to look at these Pokemon from how they've been used in past generations, and even a single move can change things a decent amount. I think Landorus is the one I'm most curious about, because now, these signature attacks are all special attacks, and Landorus primarily has been a physical attacker, but we've seen mixed sets throughout the years, and now it gets access to Nasty Plot as well, and it can burn opponents as well, and these moves are, I think, 100% accurate in rain as well. So,
wait, it gets Nasty Plot?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna throw up.
Isn't that crazy? so now I'm like, you could have like a special attacking Landorus, either Incarnate or Therian.
With Terastallization.
Yeah, with Terra, you can burn as well. And I'm like, my head hurts just even thinking about all of this. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw that they gave all of these guys a new move. I was like, why? And then with Cresselia, I think the thing I was laughing at the most was like, they decreased its defenses by 10. And I was like, it's 2023, like 10 years, maybe this is like 10 years overdue, like I still think it'll be solid. And I think Terra actually makes it substantially better, right? Because there will be a lot like in hit Cresselia for super effective, like Wicked Blow from Urshifu, which by the way is also nerfed slightly. Definitely echo all of those sentiments. I'm mainly curious. We talk a lot about the idea of like power creep, right? And now there's just going to be a lot more really strong Pokemon. I do think the Mons that were designed this gen are generally really powerful, so I think a lot of them can stand toe to toe with the old Mons. I am curious, the ones that we had played with so much in previous generations, will they continue to be super dominant? And as of right now, I do feel like Pokemon like Tornadus, Landorus, Thundurus, Cresselia, Heatran, in my head, they all feel really strong. The main thing I'm personally curious about is the Hisuian Pokemon, just because we obviously never have had competitive experience with any of them. So even introducing, 10 plus new Pokemon is always intriguing to me. I don't expect most of them to be maybe world champion contenders, but I do expect cool teams to be built around all of them.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Pokemon that it's going to be really weird to see. So for instance, like Rillaboom, for instance, did lose access to both Grassy Glide and High Horsepower this generation. generation, but it seems players are still using it strong with grassy terrain. We might actually see that Landorus signature move be really into play because there was like a format at the end of Gen 8 people played without Dynamax, Spike Muff Cup, I believe it was called, where they would just like no Dynamax, and a really big core of that was like a Rillaboom plus like they would still be using Landorus T, but they would be using Earth Power. But Landorus having, I think, access to this new special move is actually going to really help out because you don't want to use Earthquake in grassy terrain. And yeah, then there's like Pokemon like Regieleki, which is an absolutely insane fast mon. It's absolutely ridiculous how fast that mon is. Or Shifu, which just has the ability to break through protect, which wasn't really like that bad, I think, in Dynamax. I felt like in Dynamax it was like very tolerable, but I feel without Dynamax, and sure, Wicked Blow did get nerfed, but it was like a 5 base power nerf. It's really not that big of a deal in comparison. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of heavy hitters and a lot less defensive play, although we do have some, I guess, a bit of bulkier monster, Celio and a few others coming back, but I still think we got like a lot of power dynamics with how powerful like all these new moves, all these like strong hitters, and can't protect because of Urshifu.
I wonder then if maybe people can start to lean into some of the other archetypes that are sticking out that might actually start to get kind of good with the new home inclusions. I'm thinking particularly about Trick Room. So like going back to the Ursaluna thread, that particular Pokemon, pretty slow, might be able to operate under Trick Room conditions. And that leads me to Weirdeer as one of the Pokemon that I feel like is really interesting to look at. It gets Intimidate as well as it's able to set Trick Room, and it's pretty bulky. So I kind of feel like there might be some interesting play around that, and maybe you got Streer.
Yeah, I think the horses should be really interesting. I know that Spectre has a really bad moveset, and I feel like having a faster ghost-type Pokemon in Fluttermane will probably make it harder to use, but like, I remember it was like good in Sword and Shield, like it had a niche there. These Pokemon in some ways were only balanced because of their limited move pools, and all of a sudden you give a Pokemon like Regieleki Terra Blast with Terra Ice, and it's no longer checked by Landorus or Grass types or anything, so I think that's going to be scary. But the other thing is, not only do all these Pokemon have Terastallization, there's also new defensive items, specifically Clear Amulet and Covert Cloak. So like when I think about Urshifu, I thought about it being balanced primarily because of Dynamax, like James said, and then Intimidate. Like yes, it could crit through Intimidate, but like for close combat, which would be its strongest move otherwise, the Intimidate was like really helpful, and also for its like priority attack, Aqua Jet and Sucker Punch. Being able to cut the damage of that was really important. And now you could do like Clear Amulet, which would also stop like Electro Web or Icy Wind speed drops. And like for Regieleki, I don't know, like maybe like you have the option of like Covert Cloaks. Now it's not like threatened by Fake Out, or you could even Terra Ghost. So I just think like there's a lot of multiplicative scaling in a sense. Like there's so many options that these old Pokemon have in the new games. I feel like the better a Pokemon is, the better it can use different tools. And this generation feels like there are so many tools to get around common counterplay. So I just like am a little concerned seeing how they'll play out.
Yeah, I think about Covert Cloak in particular, it on Tornadus, for example, just being able to block Fake Out and Priority Tailwind, because I think one of the biggest debates in previous gens was, do I run Protect on Tornadus? Also, now we're playing in an open team sheet format in general, which makes things interesting, but sometimes you'd have to give up a slot for Protect just so you can get around Fake Out, getting Tornadus knocked out on turn 1, not being able to set up Tailwind, but with Covert Cloak now, it's really hard to deny. James, of course, you are really the Tornadus expert among us here, so what do you think? Are you excited to try that out? Do you think it makes it that much more viable?
Dude, that would have been my dream item actually in Gen 8, because like one of my problems was like Fake Out and Electro Web from like Regieleki and Cinder combinations, and like Covert Coat would have solved literally both of them. I had White Herb on one point, like crying out Torn. I've had to basically, I think you had to run Protect, I think, in Gen 8 because of that Fake Out plus Electric combination. But like Overcloak is such a good item, I think, on a lot of mons. Tornadus is an especially good one. I mean, the Fake Out as well as like the Electro speed drops and Icy Wind, and that really pairs well because Tornadus also still continues to be able to go for Icy Winds under Tailwind, which could be really important. Or that new move, which its Flying Storm move actually is able to like has the chance to lower speed as well. It's a spread move that's really strong. Like it's absolutely ridiculous.
Another spread move though. Come on. We had enough of that with like the Calyrex, the Glacial Lance, the Astral Barrage. I don't need another one of those in the format.
One thing that's interesting about Tornadus, by the way, I think you can set up
all weathers.
All the weathers, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
That is crazy.
Yep, they have Snowscape, they gave it Sandstorm, and Sunny Day
and Rain Dance. TM's 49 through 52, so this thing can do everything.
I'm pissed. That's messed up. We are running out of time here, so I guess I want to ask y'all, do you have any closing thoughts about Regulation D before we wrap up? My closing thought is, who made this decision? And why? Like, I feel like it would have been so fun to have this be the first format of next year, but to have it start at Worlds, like, I mean, I'm not complaining. Like, I take the hand I'm dealt, but like, if I were a complainer, I would be complaining about this, to be honest.
What would you have picked as the ideal Worlds format then, Wolf, if it wasn't the Pokemon home?
I'm fine with Regulation C. I feel like that is the natural conclusion to first regional deck Scarlet and Violet. I don't think Paldea Prologue would be very good with Koraidon, Miraidon, plus everything else. Like, I think I would have rather... I guess I'd honestly rather have Regulation D than Paldea Prologue. But I think that like Regulation C was totally fine to end on. Like, that felt appropriate to me. And like, I feel like this just feels like rushing for no real reason, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like it would have been boring to see Paldea Prologue, but I also hope that maybe they don't confirm this as the Worlds format just to keep things fresh going into next year.
I definitely appreciate the wishful thinking. I would be shocked if this weren't the Worlds format. You know, I'm willing to put some good money on it. But I think for me, it would have been really cool if they only allowed the Hisuian Pokemon, but not all of the other Pokemon from the past gens. Because I think just adding the Hisuian Pokemon does change things a lot, right? Like, we talked a lot about Ursaluna, and I wonder about the viability of Trick Room just increasing. It synergizes really nicely with things like Bronzong or Oranguru, for example. Like you said, Wolf, we're kind of just dealt the cards. Once again, I think it'll be really hectic as a player. I think as a spectator or caster, it'll actually be maybe more fun to watch than normal. I definitely was not expecting this. For me, I'm just excited to try out some of these brand new Hisuian Pokemon in particular. We'll see just how much impact everything has. Even just thinking about like Booster Energy, bundle against Regieleki, Speed Wars, Icy Wind, Electroweb, Tornadus with Tailwind, with Covert Cloak. Like, my head just hurts thinking about all of it.
Yeah, this is definitely one heck of a format. I still don't understand why they include some of the other Pokemon that weren't allowed. Like, why is Roaring Wake and Iron Leaf still banned and a few others? But like, I don't get that. But like, at least I think with other series in the past, especially with like, I don't know, 2019 was the best example. We actually built up towards like a metagame point where like everything like made sense. Like, it was like a step forward, and like we saw combinations from previous series like work in the next series and continue evolving over time. Here, I feel like it just completely changes the ball. Like, we have too many changes where it's not even like closely related at all. So it's going to be an exciting Worlds. We're just going to have to be able to find like the best combinations and prepare the best teams that we possibly can and play our best at the World Championship, given the tools that we have. So it'll be exciting, I think, at least for a one-time experience here, since this is the first time we're again having a new format like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Rosemary, did you have any closing thoughts?
Buckle up.
So true, bestie.
Wait, before the last question I want to ask all of you is, what is the Pokemon you're most excited to try out?
That's a tough one. I guess Weirdeer. I think Weirdeer would be the one that I would be most interested to see if it could work.
I think I want to try Nanomaris or Sneasler with Unburden, because I think there are some fun teams that I could probably prep with that Pokemon. Dire Claws is a funny move, but yeah, those would probably be the two I'm pretty interested to try out.
I'm curious about Hisuian Gudra, because I think they made its stats a little bit better, and I think that could be like, I've always felt like Gudra was almost a good Pokemon, and I am curious to see with better typing and better like stat distribution if that holds up. So yeah, I'm curious about Gudra. Also, I like Overquill a lot. I looked at it, I don't think it's good enough to actually be good, but like Dark Poison type with Intimidate sounds really cool in a lot of ways.
I always just wanted to see more Zoroark in general. I think it's like really hard to use, but I remember trying it out in Sword and Shield and thinking it was actually more legit than people gave it credit for. So I also think Ursaluna, like, I love Trick Room, I love Cresselia, I love Bronzong, so I'm definitely going to be playing with an Ursaluna team from day one of the format. Curious to see how people solve for that Pokemon in particular. But yeah, that would be my answer.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today at Beastcoast Pokemon. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to get more of this good content, and let us know in the comments down below which Pokemon you're most excited for and which one you are most afraid of. Thanks for watching.